Thank you for joining us here at the National Communications Network. My name is Shaquan Gill, and today we'll be discussing, very importantly, the presentation of Budget 2025. Joining me in studio, in fact, not in studio, joining me at the Ministry of Finance for a conversation on Budget 2025 is none other than the Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance and the public service, Dr. Ashni Singh. Dr. Singh, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much, Shaquan. As always, it's a great pleasure.
Yeah. We're talking about Budget 2025, essentially the last budget in this term in office for the People's Progressive Party civic government. What would you say is special about this year's budget for your government?
Well, in fact, it's very interesting that you should ask that question, Shaquan, because it causes me to reflect on the history of annual budgets produced by not only our government, but successive governments in Guyana over the years. And I've been around for a few years, and so I have the privilege, the fortunate position of being able to reflect on the history of budgets that have been presented to the Parliament. And you see a very clear, when you look at that history, you see a very clear difference between budgets that have been tabled by People's Progressive Party civic governments and budgets that have been tabled by APNU, AFC, or PNC governments. If I were to go all the way back to the pre-1992 PNC government, I was, of course, a young person then, but I was old enough to be aware of what was going on in the country and what was going on in the economy. And I recall during that period, people would await budget day with great fear and trepidation, not knowing which new punitive measure would be introduced and which benefit will be taken away. And so throughout that period, budgets were anticipated with great trepidation and fear. And we recall a number of budgets during that period where the PNC either introduced new taxes, introduced new austerity measures, cut expenditure. There were certain words that we don't use anymore today. People have forgotten them. But in that period, the words that were in common use when you thought of a budget were words like devaluation or retrenchment. Devaluation, of course, spoke to the devaluation of our currency, which in many cases had a devastating impact on people in Guyana. It would be recalled that the currency, the Guyana dollar, moved very sharply from 10 to 1 to 33 to 1 to 100 to 1 in the space of just a few years, completely eroding the value of people's savings. And then secondly, I mentioned the word retrenchment. A lot of people in today's generation, don't even know what that word, have never used that word, but in those days, that was the era when the PNC was sending public sector workers home. And so words like those were very common in the discourse on matters surrounding the budget. People awaited the PNC budgets with tremendous fear. Interestingly, we got a second opportunity, particularly the younger generation got an opportunity to see the PNC in more contemporary times. And I'm here referring to the 2015 to 2020 period, when here again, APNU, as they might now call themselves, APNU AFC, brought budgets that year after year imposed hardships on the Guyanese people and imposed punitive measures on the Guyanese people. Year after year, we saw the imposition of over 200 taxes. We saw the taking away of the cash grant. We saw the taking away of the bonus to discipline services workers. We saw the slashing of the mortgage interest relief ceiling by a half. And just to give a few examples. And so, as recently as 2015 to 2020, APNU AFC budgets were awaited with fear. Which benefit will be taken away? Or which new tax will be introduced? Or which new hardship measure will be introduced? Or which benefit will be denied during the APNU AFC period? And so, the unavoidable conclusion is whether you look at the pre-1992 PNC era or you look at the 2015 to 2020 era, PNC/APNU/AFC budgets have always been budgets that were awaited with fear and trepidation. In striking contrast, budgets presented by successive People's Progressive Party civic governments, and I will particularly deal with the post-1992 period, 1992 to 2015, and then 2020 onwards, have all been budgets that have addressed in a direct and frontal way the needs of the people, addressing the concerns of the people, delivering services to the people and improving those services, creating opportunities for people and enhancing those opportunities, laying the foundation for a more resilient and a more prosperous country going forward into the future, which obviously is in the interest of the people, and generally doing so in a framework that has not been punitive to the Guyanese people. And so if you look year after year, what we have done in the first instance when we came into office back in 2020, we reversed the punitive measures. We returned the benefits to the Guyanese people, and we have been increasing them progressively and incrementally over the years. And so every budget that has been presented by the People's Progressive Party in government has been a budget that has served the people. And Budget 2025 is going to be no different in this regard. And so you ask what is special about Budget 2025, and I would say that if I were to summarize all that I've said in one sentence, I would say that if there was anything that I would say is special about Budget 2025, I would say that it would continue the track record of previous PPP budgets. And in particular, if we were to focus our attentions on this term of office, Budget 2025 will continue to deliver to the Guyanese people what we committed to them we will deliver. And that is improvement in their well-being, improvement in the opportunities that are available for them, and improvement in their circumstances in every regard.
One of the policies that I know now is eagerly anticipated was mentioned by the Vice President in one of his conversations, his press conferences, was the incentivizing in some way or the other of the reduction of taxes for some individuals. Could you share with us what is the thought process or the consideration behind introducing a policy of that nature?
Sure. So obviously I'm not going to, this work is ongoing. We're still very much at work on the budget. And as you know, I'm not going to get into the specifics or details or the mechanics of any one initiative or measure or the other. But I want to cast my answer against the following frame of reference. A resilient economy, by definition, has to be one that can withstand shocks, that can withstand short-term disruptions, that is not solely dependent on a single commodity or the price of a single commodity, and that can be sustainable into the very long term. That resilience and sustainability speak to the long term. And building a resilient economy, building a strong economy, building an economy that is diversified and therefore resilient, requires particular attention to be paid to issues of production and productivity. Ultimately, our prosperity as a country will depend on our capacity to produce and to produce in a competitive manner. And by producing, I mean producing goods and services. Everything that we do, all that we produce, the goods and services that we produce in the economy, to be able to do so in a competitive way. Because the reality is that we're operating in a global economic system. And that global economic system is an open system. The Guyanese economy is still very much a small open economy. We're still very much a price taker. We're still vulnerable to the ebb and flow of commodity prices, for example, particularly now that we are even more a commodity-based economy because we have a larger and growing oil and gas sector. And so we have to be attentive to issues of resilience. And issues of resilience require diversification. For you to have a resilient economy, you have to have a diversified economy. And for you to have a diversified economy, you have to ensure that you are competitive, and in particular competitive across all sectors. That's why we're investing, for example, in the gas to energy project, because the gas to energy project will reduce the cost of electricity, which will make manufacturing enterprise and other enterprises more viable and more competitive. And so in the context of sustainability and resilience for the long term, we are attentive to issues of competitiveness. And in being attentive to issues of competitiveness, we have to pay attention to production and productivity. Being able to produce more and being able to do it more competitively and more efficiently. And so we're considering, all of the dimensions, all of the things that matter and could potentially contribute to more production and more productivity. And we want industries to be more productive. We want across the entire spectrum, we want every industry to be more productive. We want every individual to be more productive, to work more, to work harder, to deliver more, and to deliver it more efficiently. And so we're looking at ways in which this can be done to promote, like I said, to realize greater competitiveness, to enhance production and productivity, and to incentivize and reward greater effort.
Yeah. Minister, one of the things that I know a lot of people want to see as well is all the work that goes into budget preparation, and I'd be happy if we could do a brief tour of the Ministry of Finance so people can see the work that goes into the preparation of the budget with just days before your budget speech. Is that okay?
Sure, sir. I'd be happy to visit. I mean, obviously, this is a long process that has been going on. We almost spend the entire, the budget preparation process isn't a single discrete activity that takes place a few days before the budget. Obviously, it intensifies immensely before the budget. But I'd be happy to maybe visit a few of the departments that are involved in the process and tell you a little bit about what they do.
Let's do that. So tell me what happens in this room.
So this is the Economic Policy Analysis Unit. They monitor economic developments globally, regionally, and most importantly, domestically. So there are a number of economists working in this unit who monitor the various sectors of the economy, maintain databases of the various key economic indicators, keep those files updated. And of course, the various sectors of the economy come together to form an internally consistent, comprehensive macroeconomic model, which this unit also maintains. That forms the basis for not only ex post monitoring of economic developments, but also ex ante projections. And so a lot of the economic projections that we do are generated by this unit. Unit, of course, works very closely with other public sector agencies in the finance sector in particular, the central bank and the Bureau of Statistics, each of whom has their respective mandates in relation to monitoring macroeconomic performance and particular macroeconomic variables. The budget, of course, is cast within the context of a macroeconomic framework.
Right.
That framework, of course, reflects the intelligence that we have on the historic performance of the economy, and it reflects, of course, our anticipation of future developments, which in turn reflect our expectations regarding global developments, things like global and regional growth, things like anticipated price movements in global markets, in particular things like commodity markets. Commodity prices, for example, take on a particular significance in our economy because we are very much a commodity exporter, and so world market prices for commodities have a significant impact on the projections that we do. And so this is the unit that's responsible for, like I said, maintaining the databases of historic data on key economic variables, maintaining, updating the macroeconomic framework, which then informs the analysis and policy decisions that we make at a policy level,
Right.
and importantly prepares the macroeconomic projections that will form the basis for the macroeconomic framework within which the budget is prepared.
Which is exactly what I wanted to ask, particularly to how much of the work of this department feeds into the announcements that we see and we hear, and even your speech on Budget Day.
Well, the whole of the budget is cast within the context of, like I said, the macro framework. And so, for example, a lot of the macroeconomic performance that I will, in the first instance, report on, things like growth in the economy, performance in the external sector, that's the balance of payments, our transactions with the rest of the world, our trade and other transactions with the rest of the world, performance in the monetary and financial sector, things like private sector credit, performance in the fiscal sector, government revenues and expenditure. A lot of that is either monitored here or collected and compiled and analyzed here. And that, as you know, forms a very important part of the budget. I will report on historic economic performance, and I will also speak about targets and projections for the coming year. And of course, I typically also identify some medium-term issues that we have to be mindful of. So a lot of that work generates from the EPAU. It's a small team, but a very talented and hard-working team, like everybody else in the ministry.
Definitely. I guess we can move on to the next department, shall we?
Hi, Dominic. How are you?
So where are we now, Minister?
So we're now in the Monitoring and Evaluation Division. We were just in the Economic Policy Analysis Unit, where I mentioned that they monitor and maintain databases of key macroeconomic variables. But of course, in the Ministry of Finance and in the budget, we make financial provisions. But these financial provisions are intended to implement government projects and programs and achieve particular outcomes. And we do also have a very strong interest, as you can imagine, in the outcomes that are being achieved. What are we achieving with the money that we're spending through the budget? And so the Monitoring and Evaluation Division, the division that we're in right now, leads that work within the ministry, monitoring key performance indicators for the various budget agencies, their respective programs and projects. And so for each program, we have a list of indicators that we track, a list of variables that speak to the objectives or the objectives and by extension the targets that those programs are seeking to achieve. So we maintain a database of performance indicators. So, some of them would be very easy to think of, things in the health sector and the education sector and so on. Teacher to student ratio, hospital bed to population ratio, doctor or medical personnel to population ratio, and I'm mentioning some of the more obvious ones,
Right.
but we have a very rich range of variables that we observe that try to capture as well as we possibly can, given the data that is out there, as well as we possibly can, the performance of the various programs. And so that's also actually a very important part of the budget, because every program in the budget is accompanied by what's called a program performance statement that describes in summary not only the financial allocations that the program is being allocated through the budget, but also the performance targets or performance objectives in as measurable a way as we possibly can measure them, that the program is expected to achieve with the resources that are allocated. And that work of maintaining the not the hardcore macroeconomic data,
Right.
which is done in the other unit, but the performance indicators, which are obviously specific to the respective sectors. I should add that a lot of these indicators are also tied to some of our external, I wouldn't call them obligations, but some of our external undertakings. So for example, like every other country around the world, Guyana has subscribed to successive global goals that the international community has set itself. So originally the Millennium Development Goals, and then subsequently the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs as you would know them. We, like every other country around the world, would have been a part of the conceptualizing of those goals and the adopting of those goals as key development objectives that the global community has set itself. And so many of the targets, many of the indicators that we monitor and the targets that we set in this division also have a relationship with those external undertakings that we have adopted, like for example the SDGs. So for example, the goals that we're monitoring and the objectives that we're monitoring or indicators that we're monitoring in health, at least some of them will have a relationship with the health related SDGs. The indicators that we're monitoring in relation to agriculture and food security will have some relationship to the SDGs that are concerned with nutrition and food security.
Yeah.
So that work basically is led here. There are, of course, statistics units or planning units or M&E units in several of the ministries. Many of them monitor a far wider range of indicators and a far wider range of variables in their respective sectors. But here is where it all comes together. And here is where the program performance statements, which are incorporated in the budget and go to the Parliament as part of the budget documentation, this is the division that leads that work within the ministry.
So how do these indicators, maybe say in previous years, impact maybe the numbers or the amount of revenue that is directed towards a particular sector? Is that how it works too?
Well, that's a very important question that you ask, because I would say there isn't a rigid link between the performance in a particular sector and the financial resources that are allocated to it. I wouldn't say that there is a rigid or formulaic link between the two, but I would certainly say that the performance indicators do provide very valuable information to us as we make decisions in relation to resource allocation. So for example, if you see a particular indicator not doing particularly well, you then make decisions as to what needs to be done to help that indicator do better, to help us do better in that indicator. And then in some cases we have indicators that go beyond just an aggregate national indicator. In some cases we have sub-national, like regional data as well, which we monitor. So we might know, for example, that particular investments need to be made in the hinterland or in particular parts of the hinterland. So for example, when we monitor water and access to water, access to potable water, we monitor it not only on the coast, but we monitor it in the hinterland, because of course access to potable water in the hinterland is a very different dynamic than it is on the coast. The coast has the GWI network. In hinterland communities, we have to have individual water harvesting and distribution systems, whether a well or natural harvesting, typically a well in most communities, but then storage and distribution within the community. So it's a very different dynamic in the hinterland. And so we monitor that too, because we want to know, we set ourselves certain goals that we want to improve quality of life for all Guyanese, irrespective of where they live. And so you'll hear me speak in the budget speech about what we're doing, in a number of special initiatives in the hinterland water, hinterland roads, etc. So to come back to the question that you asked, I would say that even though there isn't a formulaic link or a rigid robotic link between performance and resources, I would say that the performance information is certainly very valuable and important in the decisions that are made about resource allocation. To give you an example, when I remember many years ago when we were government previously, I remember one of the MDGs then that we were performing particularly slowly at was maternal and child health. That was one of the SDGs that we were struggling a little bit with, and I remember we had a special program for accelerated investments in maternal and child health, which raised our performance in the indicator. But it continues to be an area where we want to do better. You will see, for example, now, for example, that we're investing in a special maternal and pediatric hospital for the specific reason that we want to raise our performance indicators in terms of maternal and infant mortality, etc. We want to improve our performance in those areas. To get to a point where we really have eliminated or reduced an absolute minimum the historic challenges that we faced in some of these areas. So that's why, for example, we're investing as aggressively as we are in the healthcare system generally, and in particular in maternal and child health, because we want every single Guyanese person to be able to live a long and healthy and very productive life.
Yeah, excellent. I think we can go to the next one now.
Very
good.
Yeah? Thank you.
So we're downstairs now. What happens on this section of this floor?
So this here is the Fiscal and Monetary Division. It's the division, this is really the heart and soul of the budget division. Because having the macroeconomic framework having been developed, of course, the meat of the budget is the detailed budget estimates that form the basis for the appropriations that we will seek within the context of the fiscal framework that forms a part of the broader macroeconomic framework. And so the Fiscal and Monetary Division is essentially the division that manages in particular the recurrent budget. They put the budget, the estimates together, so the division prepares the whole of the budget estimates, incorporating the capital budget, which is managed by the Project Cycle Management Division, which we'll visit afterwards, and the recurrent budget, which is managed within the Fiscal and Monetary Division, FMD as we call it. And so within this division, the recurrent budget is prepared. The obviously, well, in fact, I should start from the fact that budget submissions are received from budget agencies and consolidated and reviewed, and we have a process that involves meetings at several levels, technical meetings, meetings at ministerial level, etc. Consideration by the cabinet, policy decisions that are made, etc. That will then inform what goes into the budget estimates. And the recurrent estimates are prepared within this division in keeping with the policy directions that come from ministerial level, my level, and that comes from the cabinet level as well. And so the recurrent estimates are prepared here. And then, of course, the capital estimates, the estimates for the capital expenditure come from the Project Cycle Management Division and are incorporated here as well into the entire budget estimates. During the course of the year, once the budget is approved, it is also this division that manages the execution of the recurrent budget. So things like monthly releases to agencies, projections, in-year projections, and monthly releases to agencies. That's also done here, and monitoring of the execution of the recurrent budget and preparation of budget execution tables during the course of the year so that we can see whether people are on stream in relation to executing their budget, whether they're not, etc. So we do quite a lot of monitoring here as well in relation to budget execution. But at this time of the year, the particular function that preoccupies the team in FMD is the preparation of the budget estimates, like I said, principally the recurrent estimates in the first instance, but then bringing it all together to produce the entire estimates which will form the overall fiscal position of the government that will go to Parliament.
There is a particular position that government has taken over the last few years in relation to the recurrent side of the budget that I've been told is vastly different from what we've seen in the past. Could you share a little bit about that?
No, absolutely. So there's a very, if you look at the historic trend, you see a very distinct structural break in the composition of the budget. From the time we demitted office in 2015, you saw an immediate shift in the orientation of the budget. Because as soon as the APNU AFC came into government in 2015, you saw the capital budget significantly decline and the recurrent budget dramatically increase. And throughout the 5 years that they were in government, they maintained an elevated and increasing recurrent budget and a suppressed capital budget. There were a number of factors that reflect this. The first is relative priorities. We feel that it's important that I should say that structure, you saw another structural break because as soon as we came back into government, you see immediately, you would see an immediate reorientation of the budget with once again the capital investments taking up a bigger share of the budget relative to the recurrent or consumption expenditure of government. The reason for this, there are many reasons for this, stark contrast. The first is, of course, a perspective, an orientation. For us, it's very important, for us in the People's Progressive Party as a government, and this is something that we also said in opposition, but for us as a government, we recognize the importance not only of consuming today, but also of investing in the things that matter and that will create growth, that will generate growth and create wealth in the future. And those are the things like the public infrastructure, things like the social infrastructure, the roads that will open up new productive land, the roads that will connect us with our neighbors, or the transport infrastructure that will connect us with our neighbors, the transport infrastructure that will connect communities, so reduce the time and cost of commute, for example, people coming from work to home, etc. the investment in drainage and irrigation, which in turn catalyzes productive activity, agriculture and food production, which in turn, of course, generates incomes for the food producing communities, and of course, improves the well-being of our population as a whole. So for us, as a government, we consider investment in the public capital stock, public infrastructure and other public capital goods as being of the paramount importance, because those are the things that matter for the long-term well-being of the country. If you don't invest in roads and in hospitals and in schools, there will come a point in time when your productive activity will grind to a halt. Mm-hmm. And when your ability to be productive and competitive in the global economy will dissipate and disappear. If you don't have a well-educated workforce that is in good health, then you don't have anybody to contribute to productive activity. And so investment in education, building schools, making sure everybody has an opportunity to be educated, at primary and secondary levels, and then ultimately at tertiary levels, specialized technical and vocational training, skills training, particularly in a rapidly evolving and changing economy, investment in the infrastructure that will ensure that those things are achieved is absolutely important. And we've always felt this. We felt this prior to 2015 when we were in a very different fiscal situation from where we are now, and we feel it even more strongly now when we're in a slightly better, somewhat better fiscal situation. We feel that it's absolutely important that we invest in the things that matter for the long term. And of course, these things matter for the well-being of people too. Because if you don't invest in hospitals, no matter how well off people are, they will not be able to get good quality health care. If you don't invest in schools, your population will simply not be able to get good access to good quality education domestically. Mm-hmm. And so the long-term viability of a country, much less its long-term prosperity and its long-term competitiveness, depend very heavily in investment in the infrastructure that matters for long-term growth and competitiveness. And so that's the first thing. And then secondly, the APNU AFC had a proclivity for consumption and wasteful consumption. I don't necessarily, on this occasion, want to go into the details of this, but I mean, a lot has already been said about their expenditure on wasteful and unproductive things that didn't contribute to the well-being of people and things that didn't contribute to the prosperity of the country. It's not an accident that the economy has grown and has always grown at a faster rate when the PPP is in government from when the APNU AFC is in government. That's not by accident. Economic growth doesn't happen by magic. It doesn't materialize out of thin air. Certain conditions have to be in place for economic growth to be realized. And economic growth is important because it's growth in the economy that will generate jobs, that will give people, all of the young people of the country, good quality jobs, that will generate incomes so that every young person or every person of working age can have a good quality job and earn a decent income and be able to take care of themselves. It's economic growth that ultimately will ensure that we achieve economic empowerment of our citizens, because it's only through that independence, the independence of having a skill, being able to get a good quality job, being able to earn a decent income, it is only through that means that one really realizes economic independence and economic empowerment as an individual. And that's the Guyana that we're building. Yeah. A Guyana where every single Guyanese person is able to achieve a situation where they're able to get a good quality job, earn a good income, and take care of themselves and their family in the way that they would like to.
Excellent. Let's take a look at the capital side of the budget, shall we? So, Minister, we're in a different part of the ministry now. Tell us and walk us through what happens on this side.
Sure. So we're now in what's described as the Project Cycle Management Division, essentially the division that manages the entire project cycle, projects through their entire life cycle. More popularly, you would have heard, or more commonly, you would have heard of the Public Sector Investment Program, yeah, which is essentially government's investment program, the whole of the capital budget of the whole of the central government. And so the PCMD, as we have abbreviated it, manages the capital budget of the country. I should, in fact, start from the point of preparation of the budget, which is what they're currently, entirely focused on. And so this is the division that receives and analyzes the capital budget submissions, prepares relevant analysis and briefing notes, etc., for me, and supports me as we consider the budget proposals that we would have received from various budget agencies, the various sectors, and essentially is the custodian of the process that gets us from the point of initial requests for capital allocations to the point where we make a submission, in the first instance to Cabinet and then to Parliament. Policy decisions obviously are made along the way at ministerial level, at Cabinet level, etc. And so we generate ultimately the capital budget proposal that we will, in the first instance, integrate into the whole of the national budget and then take to Parliament and debate in the Parliament. And so this is an extremely important division, of course, much like all of the others, because they manage the public investment program, the public sector investment program. You can imagine that all of the big projects come together here. Many of these projects are, of course, externally financed. And so within the PCMD's operations, apart from the domestically financed projects, they also manage the multilateral projects and the bilateral projects, the projects that we're implementing with multilateral agencies like the World Bank, the IDB, the CDB, the Islamic Development Bank, the Caribbean Development Fund, etc. Multilateral, hemispheric or regional development institutions, and also, of course, our bilateral projects that we're financing with partners like the US Exim Bank, Canada, the UK, UKEF, as you know, has been doing more work with us, and other bilateral partners, India and China and others. And so all of that is essentially managed here. In the first instance, the preparation of the budget, the capital budget, but right here is also where the execution of the capital budget is managed during the course of the year. So once the budget is approved in Parliament, the whole of the function of managing the execution takes place here. Well, I shouldn't say it's coordinated here.
Yeah.
And so, for example, things like the monthly releases for capital projects happens here in the first instance. Projections in terms of how resources will be needed over the course of the year, releases during the course of the year, monitoring the actual execution, having released funds to the various agencies, monitoring their utilization of those funds, monitoring the progress of the projects also takes place here. As you know, we have very significantly increased the size of the capital budget. We're investing more. We spoke about that just now, the importance that we place as a government on investing in the things that matter for long-term growth, and importantly, the things that matter for the well-being of the Guyanese people. And so that whole bringing together of the capital budget, and both for the purposes of preparation and also for the purposes of execution, implementation, and monitoring, happens right here.
The President has said already that in 2025, we can expect a lot of investment in communities themselves. What can people see and expect from the capital side of the budget that will ultimately translate into projects in their communities?
Well, you know that I'm not going to say much now about the specifics of what are in the budget. I wouldn't want to spoil your surprise, your and your viewers' surprise for Friday. But I can safely say that, as has been the case with all of the previous budgets that this People's Progressive Party civic government has taken to Parliament, just like our previous budget since 2020, and indeed our budgets from the pre-2015 era would have done, Budget 2025 will once again ensure, first and foremost, that we deliver on the commitments that we incorporated into our 2020 manifesto. That's our foremost objective is to ensure that we deliver to the people of Guyana what we told them we would be delivering.
Cool.
And as you and your viewers know, we're not only well on our way, we are in most cases in a situation where we have already delivered on the commitments that we gave in the manifesto, and in other cases well on our way to delivering all of those commitments before the end of the year. So first and foremost, ensuring that we deliver on our commitments, which is what the people of Guyana expect from us, and exceed those commitments in many cases. You've seen many cases where we have exceeded them. We spoke about online scholarships. Right. We have vastly surpassed the target that we set ourselves. We spoke about allocation of house lots. We are on course to exceed the target that we had set ourselves there too. And the list goes on. And so, in terms of what people can expect, and in particular at the community level, people can certainly expect that Budget 2025 will ensure that we deliver the things that we told them we will deliver. But I want also to take the opportunity to say that as a government, we have always emphasized how deeply and profoundly we appreciate listening to people and incorporating what we hear from people into the policy decisions that we make. And so we've never been a government that sits in our respective armchairs and make decisions without knowing what's happening in the world.
So, Minister, before I leave, I have one more question for us to wrap up our conversation for today. We've heard the slogan, the journey to prosperity for all. Will Budget 2025 continue us along that path?
Well, Shakwan, we've always said, and not only have we said it, but we've always demonstrated as a government a commitment to improve the lives of all of the Guyanese people. That's been something that we have said from the inception. We've demonstrated a commitment to deliver. We've demonstrated a capability to deliver. Mm-hmm. Our manifesto has articulated how we will do this. That was the basis on which we were elected to government, and we have delivered on that manifesto in an overwhelming and very demonstrable way. And so Budget 2025 will continue to deliver on the commitments that we have given since 2020 in our manifesto, and subsequently in the various policy pronouncements that have been made by His Excellency the President, by the senior leadership of our government, by the entire cabinet. Budget 2025 will see us continue to deliver. And importantly, I want to say that it will see us deliver first and foremost the things that matter most to people. Because our overriding concern is to meet the needs of the people of Guyana, to ensure that the things that matter most to the people of Guyana are addressed and are addressed satisfactorily. And secondly, lay the foundation for this modern and prosperous Guyana that we're building. We're going through a period of incredibly exciting economic growth. Mm-hmm. We have an opportunity to build a really modern and prosperous country. Mm-hmm. We are well on our way to doing that, and we will continue that work in a very aggressive way. And then thirdly, do it in such a manner that ensures that national prosperity equates to community, household, and individual prosperity. And so we have always, as a government, adopted a policy stance whereby we recognize the importance of creating opportunities for Guyanese people. And Budget 2025 will continue this work, creating opportunities for every single Guyanese family and every single Guyanese individual to improve their well-being and their circumstances and achieve a certain degree of comfort as a family and as individuals, creating opportunities essentially for personal upliftment, personal well-being, family well-being and upliftment. And the budget will continue to do that work. The budget will continue to, and Budget 2025 will continue that work, the effort to make sure that every single Guyanese family and every single Guyanese individual is able to realize their potential, is able to get a good quality education, is able to get a good quality job and earn a good income and be able to live comfortably and take care of themselves and their family. That's our objective. We've been delivering on that objective. If you look at how many people have been trained,
how many people are in work, how many people are earning, how many people are becoming homeowners, how many people are buying their own vehicles, how many people are able to educate their children in a way that we were not able to do a generation ago or 2 generations ago. You're seeing that in a very visible way, and Budget 2025 will certainly constitute a significant addition to all of the efforts that our government has been making since we returned to office to improve the well-being of the Guyanese people.
Minister, I want to thank you so much
Thank you very much.
for allowing us the opportunity to be here.
Always a
I
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Thank you very much.